Hola, buenas tardes a todas y todos. My name is Guillaume Kientz. I'm the director and CEO of the Hispanic Society Museum and Library, and it is my great pleasure to welcome you, friends of the Hispanic Society, to Las Tertulias de Arte Hispano, or Hispanic Art Gatherings. I would like to thank our members who have joined us monthly for over a year, and welcome all those who are new members and new friends of the museum and watching their first Tertulia with us this evening. These conversations take place on the first Tuesday of each month at 6 p.m. If you are not a member yet, please do consider joining by going to our website, hispanicsociety.org, and search for membership under support. Usually these events are live, but as we are coordinating our efforts from various time zones and during the summer holidays, this month's event has been pre-recorded. Today, I have the great pleasure of welcoming our very own Vanessa Pintado, Assistant Curator of Manuscripts and Rare Books. She is sharing with us a recent research on the late 15th century literary work, the Celestina of Burgos, 1499, revisiting Basilea's printer's device. This work, produced in the city of Burgos, Spain, is considered one of the greatest works of the Spanish literature, and is often understood as marking a transition from medieval to Renaissance literary traditions. Vanessa presented the first part of her research last year, so this talk is an extension and continuation of her previously shared work. Good evening, Vanessa. Few words about you. Ms. Pintado has been working at the Hispanic Society for almost 13 years. She served as assistant librarian and recently as assistant curator in the Department of Manuscripts and Rare Books. Her main focus of study has been an early edition of La Celestina held at the Hispanic Society Museum and Library. She has presented papers about her research in several conferences held in San Francisco, Mexico, and Buenos Aires. Before starting to work at the Hispanic Society, Ms. Pintado worked at the Morgan Museum and Library as reading room assistant for over 10 years. She holds a bachelor's degree in English literature from Baruch College, a master's degree in Spanish literature from Hunter College, and an MPhil in Hispanic and Luso-Brazilian literatures and languages from the Graduate Center of CUNY, City University of New York. After Vanessa's presentation, we will have a brief conversation, and I invite you to submit questions and comments in the comment section of the video. We are recorded, but we will try to comment back and answer everyone within the next few days. Thank you so much, and thank you so much, Vanessa, for sharing your knowledge about the Celestina tonight with us. The screen is yours.
Good evening to Guillaume and to our members attending tonight's Tertulia. It is a pleasure to be here and present some aspects of my latest research on one of the earliest editions of La Celestina held in the collection of the Hispanic Society Museum and Library since 1909. Since I will concentrate in a discussion of Fadriquez de Basilea's printer's device, which you can see on the screen right now, the device on La Celestina, the Burgos edition, I will give a general definition of what is a printer's device. According to the webpage of the Special Collections and Archives at the University of Liverpool, a printer's device, also known as a printer's mark or emblem, is a form of trademark used widely by printers, early printers from 15th to the 17th century. Devices were initially employed primarily as a means of differentiating a printer's work from forgeries and imitations. The actual condition of this device, printed on the last leaf of La Celestina of Burgos, is still subject of controversy. For approximately the last 180 years, critics have believed that the 1499 edition of La Celestina printed in Burgos was really published at a later date and have argued that Fadrique de Basilea's printer's device was either a facsimile or a photographic reproduction. This belief, repeated by generations of scholars, bibliographers, and booksellers, led many prominent professors and scholars to conclude that the Burgos edition of La Celestina was printed later than 1499, perhaps as late as 1502, and should not be considered the earliest printed edition of the work. So I calculate the 180 years by following the date on this catalog of the library of the late Richard Heber. When he passed away, his collection was sold in London, and the Celestina was on the 9th part of the catalog. It had many volumes, and this is the Celestina number 650, Celestina Tragicomedia di Callisto e Melibea. Notice that it's an Italian title. This copy commences on A1 without any title. It is printed in a fine character with woodcuts and concludes with the device of Fadrique 49 in green Morocco with joints. So that's the description of the binding that it had in 1836, the Celestina of Burgos. So as I just read, the binding that the 1836, it's an English binding, green color, Morocco leather. I discussed with some bookbinders, and we looked at the Celestina together at the Hispanic Society, and we spoke about possible bindings that book had. The first bindings that it could have, that and in other places, was that when a book was sold, when a person went to buy a book, the person will buy the gatherings and will take the gatherings. That means the book without go and get it somewhere else. Maybe the book, maybe somewhere else. Usually these bindings would be parchment and usually parchment. They would have almost no decoration, and there would be a title in the spine. So they were not really very special, but this is what was done in the 16th century and after. What I think would be a binding of the Celestina of Burgos. The other binding that I don't have an example of would be the one described in 1886, that is the green English binding. At the moment, this is the actual binding of our edition, Celestina of Burgos 1499. This binding is very elaborate, and I think that the person who took it to the binder was Achilles Seyer. He had the Biblioteca de Melo, and it's right here. the Super Libris, except that we cannot read it, but it's right there. And it's very decorated outside and inside. Think this uh, the this binding was done by Jean-Paul Duroux in 1869, and afterwards the book was owned by Richard Bennett from Richard Bennett in John Clear and Archer Huntington, our founder, the founder of the Hispanic Society. It was only after I saw the edition briefly at the Hispanic Society when I was a graduate student that I became interested in exploring this problem further. Having worked for many years at the Morgan Library, I became more interested in the Burgos edition of La Celestina when I learned that this copy had been in the collection of John Pierpont Morgan in the early years of the 1900s. J.P. Morgan lent the book to Huntington, and the idea was to prepare a facsimile, make a facsimile edition of the book, and subsequently, after the completion of the facsimile, after Huntington returned the original, Morgan decided to give the book as a gift to Huntington. So he inscribed the Celestina in a flyleaf. It says Archer M. Huntington, with kind regards, J.P. Morgan. He also included a letter which states that he sent the book by messenger on January 15th, 1909. And there is a very moving part here where Morgan explains a little bit of why he decides to give the book to Huntington, to give it as a gift. I have felt that the true place of the original, rather than the reprint or facsimile, was in your collection, where it will form a link in that marvelous chain of Spanish literature which you are forming. So P. Morgan thought that this Celestina of Burgos unique copy really belonged in Huntington's collection. Both collections are world known, though. So this is evidence that the book was with Morgan. Morgan gave it as a gift to Huntington. When I first examined the Burgos edition, I took for granted the printer's device was a facsimile. However, after careful observation of the book, particularly the last folio, I did not immediate evidence to believe the printer's device was a reproduction edited on a modern paper, as some studies suggest. Thus started my research, which seemed like a puzzle that had to be put together. I wanted to demonstrate that the last leaf is not a modern reproduction, nor a facsimile made by a skillful artist, and in any case, if the was bound either at around the time of the sale of Richard in 1836 and 1837, or in 1869 when it was rebound by the French binder Chambolle-Duroux. After years of research consulting the edition several, measuring the size of paper, illustrations, textbook, and in collaboration with colleagues from the Morgan Library and other institutions, I believe the printer's device on the last leaf printed in Burgos is genuine and it's not a facsimile, as it has been believed since the 19th century. Observe inconsistencies in the paper, which would indicate that the device was on an inserted leaf. I also concluded that the paper of the page of the book or last leaf on which the printer's device is printed is the same as the rest of the book, with the only being on this last page is thinner, to the fact that it had been treated perhaps more than once. I believe that the last page containing Basilea's device was at some time or another pasted onto another piece of paper or flyleaf. This evidence may explain that when Jean-Jacques Brunet consulted the Burgos copy of La Celestina to describe it for a second time in his new edition of the manual of 1860, he saw the last page pasted, transferred, or reporté, to cite his term, to a paper that had a 1795 watermark. And as we can see here, this is a photo of the actual book in its condition. And we can see that there's no this and there's no watermark. I have seen the book many times, and the watermark was the page with the watermark was actually not found even in 1902 when Fouché del Bosque consulted the book at the Mortino. So what I think happened was that this last leaf was pasted into the flyleaves or end papers of the English binding. The English binding that was original to 1836. This, I have several slides, and this one is not so clear, but what I think happened was that the printer's device leaf was pasted into the end leaf or end papers of the English binding. Since the English bookbinders and paper makers often used the date as a watermark for their papers, it's possible that that leaf, that end leaf that I am talking about, that I'm supposing was there, was split when Chambord-Duru prepared the book to be rebound. Here is another shot of the same page. And this is what I think happened, that the last leaf of the Celestina that I showed before was pasted to the end paper of the English binding. Here it shows, when you look at it under the light, that maybe it was difficult to discern if these were two different sheets of paper, or if they were the same paper. As we have seen, this one was two different sheets of paper, and what I think is that it the separated from, cannot find evidence of that paper with the watermark 1795 that Brunet saw. And to end, I just want to explain that, to begin with, the last leaf, my hypothesis is that it was split from a paper that it was glued to, and it suffered some damage. And that's why you see some traces here where the paper is thinner. But I wanted to show you that in the Celestine was thin already. You can see right of the page here. We cannot read it, but we can see through the paper. So when we have art, instead of thinking that it's false leaf, I think it just went through some treatment, and you can see traces of brush and the very thin paper, where you can see through a lot of the details of the printer's device.
So thank you so much, Vanessa, for this fascinating presentation. I have a couple of questions for you. One would be, how did you conduct your research? I mean, what were the different steps, phases, and emotions, perhaps, that you experienced doing the research?
Yes, as I mentioned, the emotion was, it was excitement, because the book had belonged to JP Morgan first, and second, because it was a puzzle, it was detective work. I looked at many different early editions, including early editions of Celestina. I went to France, the Bibliothèque Nationale de France, and saw a Seville edition of 1501. And also I looked at several editions of Fadrique de Basilea, and earlier and later. Some of them have examples of this same printer's device. And so I studied, measured everything, compared everything. I was working with a professor from the Graduate Center, and he had read a lot of the articles and books about this problem. And we had discussed it, and it was very exciting. So I wanted to show my gut feeling, if I could say that, was that I didn't see any evidence after so many years looking at rare books. I did not see where everybody else saw a copy or a reproduction. So I tried to cover everything that had been said about the problem.
So how many Celestinas did you consult in total?
Oh well, absolutely so many. The Hispanic has about 41. I didn't look at all of those because they don't, some of them are later, but I consulted the one in Paris and several ones in the Biblioteca Nacional de España. I also went to Puerto Rico, to La Casa del Libro, to try to consult some Basilea books, but that didn't happen. They were in a vault, so I could not see them. So there, it took years, but there's a lot of material, and there's also lots of material that have not been discussed by most critics. So I saw everything I could in the United States, at the Hispanic, the Morgan Library, uh, Paris, and Spain.
And I guess they're all very important and rare, but to your view, what version is the most precious one?
The most precious one by definition for everybody was the 1499 edition of the Burgos edition, because it was considered the princeps in the 19th century. Um, some people, of course, don't think it is the princeps, and I also agree. Uh, we assume that a printed book with illustrations comes after a printed book without illustrations, especially in the 15th century, where the printing, it wasn't starting in 1499, but many of the German printers had gone to Spain, and we assumed that they would not invest in, ordering woodcuts if they didn't know if they were going to sell the book.
Right. But if it's not the princeps, is it the oldest?
Yes, it is considered. It is considered by Fouché del Bosque in 1902, by Di Camillo, by me, and by John O'Neill, to be the earliest edition. Many people have compared it to the 1500 edition and the 1501, and most people agree it is the earliest text that survives.
And how many copies of this earliest edition?
There's, of the Burgos edition, actually, of all of them, these are unique copies. They have survived only in one copy and outside of Spain. So it's the Burgos edition 1499, the one from Toledo, printed by Hagenbach in 1500, and the one printed by Stanislao Polono in 1501 in Seville. So there's only one copy of each of these different editions.
That makes them very, very special indeed. And I was very interested in what you shared with us about the relationship between Archer Huntington and G.P. Morgan. I mean, what can you tell us about them? I mean, they were great rare book collectors,
Yes.
and what, I mean, were they friends or just acquaintances?
I think they were more than acquaintances. They had business together in one of the banks. I think it was Morgan Harges. There's some evidence to that. And, you know, so they had business together, and they were all wealthy people who got together to promote museums, libraries, gardens, etc. They, as you said, had very special collections. Morgan and Huntington have, you know, a very important collections in the world. So they were, I wouldn't say they were very good friends, but they knew each other for a long time.
And they were competitors, I guess, because they were buying on the same market.
Yes, but JP Morgan was focused on buying everything that had to do with humans and writing. So his focus was not one culture, one country. His focus was worldwide, and that's the difference. And Huntington's focus was, you know, as we know, Spain, Portugal, Philippines, and other places where Portuguese and Spanish were spoken.
Absolutely. And well, it is a remarkable and remarkably generous gesture that he gave his own copy, so rare, to the Hispanic Society Museum and Library. And you know, decades, century after, we're still very grateful that he did so. And well, if other listening to this Tertulia are interested in asking some questions, please let them in the comment section of the video, and we will come back to you in the next few days. I'm sure we all enjoyed very much your lecture, Vanessa. Thank you again, and thank you to our members for this wonderful moment tonight. We are thrilled our community and supporters continue to stay involved with the museum. And as a reminder, we have right now 2 wonderful exhibitions open at the moment at the Hispanic Society. One is In the Heights, From University to Silver Screen. It's a photographic exhibition open in the East Building Gallery. And the second one is Latinx Diaspora, Stories from Upper Manhattan, open on the Broadway terrace outside. Our next Tertulia will happen on Tuesday, September the 7th. Dr. Marcus Berg, Senior Curator of Paintings, Drawings and Metalwork, will discuss the work of Puerto Rican artist Jose Campeche y Jordan. And additionally, I'd like to mention something to you all, as your appetite for rare books has been whetted. We're going to have a very important exhibition in the fall in New York at the Grolier Club, showcasing the most important treasures from the Hispanic Society Library. So the show at the Grolier Club will run from September the 28th to December the 18th. So don't miss the show. It worth a trip to New York if you're not living in New York, and you will certainly be amazed by the incredible collection that Archer Huntington and his successors gathered at the Hispanic Society Museum and Library. And Vanessa is one of the keepers of this, steward of this incredible collection. So thank you so much, Vanessa, again, for sharing your knowledge. It was the second part of your research. We are looking forward to hearing the third part of your research very, very soon, hopefully. Well, thank you again. Thank everyone, and have all a very good night.
Thank you.
Okay.